Hello, and welcome to Elythos. Before we begin this journey, I invite you to breathe slowly and set aside, just for a moment, everything you think you know about the afterlife. Let me ask you a question that might challenge some of our assumptions and deepen the way we understand God's love. What if our modern vision of hell is incomplete or even distorted? What if the abyss is not a prison built by a vengeful creator, but a spiritual condition we shape for ourselves, brick by brick, through our daily choices? Today, we're going to take a deep theological and historical examination of the darkness, not to sensationalize it, but to find the ultimate healing light. This is a space dedicated to helping you understand correctly, practice faithfully, and live peacefully every day. Have you ever stood at the edge of a canyon as the sun began to set and felt that strange primal shiver in your soul? Or looked up into a midnight sky and sensed the fear of the void, that sudden awareness of how small we are in the face of the infinite? For centuries, hell has been one of the most polarizing and misunderstood subjects in Christian history. It has inspired masterpieces. Dante's imagination still echoes through our culture, and it has shaped art that can haunt the mind. And sadly, it has sometimes been weaponized to produce fear rather than understanding. But here at Elythos, we look past the stereotypes of fire and brimstone. We dig into Scripture's original languages, the historical world behind the text, and the wisdom of the early church. Stay with me, steady your heart, and open your mind. This journey may be the very thing that helps you find true, lasting peace in a world of shadows. To understand the destination, we must begin with language. In many modern English translations, the word hell can act like a heavy blanket, covering several distinct ideas that the biblical writers did not always intend to merge. In Hebrew and Greek, we find a more complex map of the spiritual landscape. First, there is Sheol. In the Old Testament, Sheol is not presented as a place of flames and torture. It is the realm of the dead, the silent, shadowed place where people go down at the end of earthly life. It is often pictured as waiting, as stillness, as the great quiet where the full distinction between the righteous and the unrighteous is not yet revealed in the way later theology would describe. Then in the New Testament's Greek world, we meet Hades, a term often used as a rough equivalent to Sheol, especially in the language of the time. And in one striking passage, we find Tartarus, mentioned only once, used to describe a place of confinement for fallen spiritual beings. But the term that Jesus uses repeatedly in his warnings, the one that has strongly shaped later Christian imagination, is Gehenna. To people in and around Jerusalem, Gehenna was not merely an abstract concept. The word points to a real location, the Valley of Hinnom, outside the city. That valley carried a dark reputation long before the time of Christ. In the Old Testament, it is associated with horrific practices, idolatry, and the burning of children in sacrifice, linked to a place called Tophet, a place of burning. Over time, Gehenna became a powerful symbol, a name loaded with images of defilement, ruin, and judgment. Some later traditions describe the valley as a place of refuse and burning, and whether every detail of that picture was constant or not, the symbolism is undeniable. Gehenna represents what becomes of life when it is handed over to corruption, when it decays into waste. So when Jesus warns about Gehenna, he is not simply giving us a horror story about the afterlife. He is confronting a trajectory. He is describing what happens to a person, what happens to a soul, when it refuses love, rejects truth, and steadily turns inward until life becomes hollow. In other words, hell is not best understood as a torture chamber designed by God. It is the spiritual consequence of a heart that becomes closed, void of communion, void of love, void of the very purpose it was created for. But where does this abyss begin? In the Bible, the abyss is a vivid image, an image of the deep, of chaos, of captivity, and of the domain of evil. It is often described as a place of confinement for destructive powers. Yet it also functions like a mirror. It reflects the inner distance that opens when a creature turns away from the Creator. To explore the root of that turning, we step into the world of Christian tradition. In later Christian imagination, the story of rebellion is often told through the figure called Lucifer, a light bearer, a brilliant being who turned inward and confused reflection for source. These images draw from poetic and prophetic language that the church has long read symbolically in connection with the mystery of evil. And the heart of that mystery is not geography, it is orientation. The fall. Pride is born not merely as vanity, but as a spiritual virus. The moment a creature says no to love and yes to the absolute ego. The first hell is formed not in a pit, but in the sanctuary of the heart. Opposed to this inward spiral, tradition speaks of Michael, whose name is not a boast, but a question. Who is like God? The conflict becomes a clash of two postures, one that tries to replace the center and one that remains connected to the truth. And this is where the story turns uncomfortably personal, because the abyss is not only ancient, it is present. Whenever we place our ego above the needs of others, whenever we choose pride over humility, isolation over communion, control over love, we begin to tread the same cold path. The distance grows and the soul experiences what the Bible dares to name, a kind of outer darkness. Now we come to the hardest question. How can a God defined as infinite love allow suffering, allow judgment, allow anything that resembles hell? Many people walk away from faith because they cannot reconcile a loving Father with eternal fire. But here the early church offers a perspective that is both challenging and strangely beautiful. Some fathers, including voices often cited in the Christian East, like St. Isaac the Syrian, suggested that the fire of judgment can be understood as God's love itself, experienced differently by different hearts. Imagine the sun. To a healthy eye, the sun is warmth, life, and joy. We bask in it. We flourish under it. But to eyes damaged by darkness, eyes kept long in a cellar, light can feel like pain. The sun has not changed. The person has. God is always a son of love. But how we experience that love depends on the state of our spiritual eyes, the condition of the heart. If we train our hearts through years of selfishness, bitterness, resentment, and refusal, then the presence of absolute love can feel like burning. Not because God becomes cruel, but because we have made ourselves unable to receive love without resistance. This is why C.S. Lewis wrote, with piercing insight, that the doors of hell are locked from the inside. God respects our freedom so deeply that if we spend our lives saying, "Leave me alone," He does not violently force intimacy upon us. The tragedy is that isolation can become a chosen eternity. And this is why our mission here is to practice faithfully today. We are forming our hearts to stand in the light tomorrow, not as terror, but as joy. But the story of Elythos does not end in the shadows. There is a triumphant moment in Christian tradition known as the harrowing of hell. In the ancient creeds, we confess that Christ descended to the dead, and the church has long proclaimed that, in the silence between the cross and the resurrection, Jesus did not merely wait in the tomb. He entered the depths, not as a prisoner, but as a conqueror. Ancient icons depict him shattering the gates of the underworld, breaking its bars and reaching into the darkness to pull humanity back into the light. The message is breathtaking. There is no void so deep that the light of Christ cannot reach it. No regret so heavy that grace cannot lift it. No chain so old that the resurrection cannot break it. And if you feel trapped in your own personal darkness today, whether it is addiction, grief, anxiety, depression, or the pain of broken relationships, hear this clearly. You are not beyond reach, and if you need help, seek it. Faith and wise help can walk together. The locks are not as strong as they seem. The invitation to return to peace is always, always open. We close our journey with a fire we should seek, the fire of Sinai. When Moses climbed the holy mountain, he saw a bush burning, yet not consumed. This is the fire of divine presence, a fire that purifies without destroying, a fire that makes what it touches more alive, more holy, more itself. Unlike the fire of ego, which consumes and leaves ash, the fire of God transforms. Every time you choose humility over pride, every time you choose to share instead of hoard, every time you forgive instead of nursing a grudge, you are fueling the light of Sinai within your soul. You are turning your spirit into a sanctuary of peace rather than a void of isolation. You are choosing quietly daily to live heaven on earth right here and right now. Thank you for joining us on this exploration into the anatomy of the abyss. This research is not meant to make you afraid, but to make you aware of the power of your choices and the greater power of God's love. What part of this journey resonated with you most? Do you see the fire differently now? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. I try to read as many of your thoughts as I can, and if this episode helped you understand correctly and live more peacefully, please support our mission by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Elythos. Your engagement helps us bring this message of light to those still wandering in the dark. Until we meet again, stay in the light, keep the faith, and may you find the peace that transcends all understanding. I am your partner in faith at Elythos. Goodbye.